regulars trickling in, but I think that we should respect the times and get started. I'm going to try to do this better than last week. For all of you who have been here before, welcome back. For all of you who are here for the first time, welcome to the Harvard Experiment Art Museum. My name is Benjamin Evans. I'm the director here. Quick announcement: after this event, there's probably about 100 different things going on behind us in these different buildings back here. But I know of one event that's happening across the street over at the sort of town hall. There's a reception for the new mural that has been created. There's actually a workshop on how to do murals happening that starts in half an hour. So if anybody wants to leave, you're stuck here now. But then after that, there will be a sort of reception. Again, for all of you who have been here before, you kind of understand, I think, a little bit about what's going on. We've got two of the artists from the show here tonight, and they're going to each talk for sort of 20 minutes each, and then we'll all have conversation for the final 20 minutes or so. And their idea is to sort of give you a chance to meet and get a sense of both the art that's visible, but also a little bit about sort of how that fits into the broader exhibition in the history and tradition of the Alfred brand, let's say. So tonight we have, I even have notes this time, so let's sort of try to get things a little bit better. We have Jason, who graduated from Alfred in 1998 and returned in 2009, and from that point worked in a bunch of different capacities in Alfred until he was finally appointed in 2020 as clinical assistant professor of ceramics. His areas of expertise are quite numerous. He is definitely the person to see if you're interested in digital fabrication, and that's kind of, I think, where he's kind of best known in some ways, but he's also currently teaching tile and mold making and I guess throwing as well. He has numerous accolades to his credit, and those can all be found in the little bio book that you can get at the front of the space. Walter McConnell is also a graduate of the NYSCC in 1986, and he returned to teaching in 1997 and taught for 27 years until just last year, 2024. He is well known for two different distinct bodies of work, the first being installations like the one that you see behind or to your right over there. And he'll probably talk about that a little bit, but he's also quite well known for large unfired installations of figures and foliage, which are kind of curtained off into their own little habitats and kept humid and so on. And even though he has retired, he continues to maintain a very active studio practice and continues to exhibit and is showing on a very regular basis. So please help me welcome our two guests tonight.
Well, thank you all for coming, and I'm pleased to be part of this exhibition. I'm going to talk about sort of the history of this work, but also some of my personal history. If you don't know, Walter was one of my undergrad teachers. I went to the University of Connecticut, which was a large school, about 20,000 people, but I think there are about 3 other ceramics majors at that school. So it was a little bit isolating. There wasn't necessarily a lot of activity like there is at Alfred, but in 96, when I came up to Alfred, it was quite a shock, and it was quite in a way, disconcerting just to be in a place with so many different faculties, so many different kilns. I had only fired, one kiln, one gas kiln, and electric kilns. I came at kind of a point of transition because actually Walter came here the second year I was teaching, and also Linda Sikora was also hired that second year. So Val had retired that year, so I did get to study with Val. as an advisor and also in his glaze calc class. And Ann Courier was one of my first advisors, and a lot of the work that that's evolved through the years has been really influenced, I think, by Walter, of course, and all the other faculty that I've worked with. But Anne in particular kind of introduced me to architectural terracotta. I remember she brought us on a trip with a few people up to Boston Valley Terracotta, where they do historic renovation of architectural facades. And they used to have this huge kind of almost like, it seemed like a graveyard of all these architectural fragments. And we got to pick out some of these fragments for a show actually that was at the museum, which used to be in another location down this road called Fragments and Facades. And I always appreciated sort of the idea of this object being almost a sculptural entity in itself once it comes off the building, but also being part of a larger system. And also you'll see often in these pieces sort of the marks of the maker and how they're made. I've also over the years been collecting images of things just like brick and tile that often has, you know, the maker's handprint in it, and you can see them all over. And just sort of thinking about sort of the anonymity of some of it, you know, is kind of interesting to me. Also, I often draw a lot on my own work history. I did a lot of work renovating houses, and one of the houses I remember kind of scraping away all these layers of wallpaper and just thinking about how this pattern and this small, like thin veneer kind of influences like the character of the memory and kind of the nature of the space and how you experience it. And that kind of led me in graduate school to do some installation work, which were some rooms that you could walk into with a kind of like a camping lantern. And the walls were a cast porcelain with a fabric backing, and the floors were porcelain or bone china. And you'd kind of go in there and sort of have an experience of sort of almost like dreamlike experience in these spaces, and kind of a place to contemplate memory. But also you'd see kind of how the clay moved and cracked during the as it dried, because I was actually slip casting these large sheets of wallpaper out onto canvas. And then when I got a job out of grad school, luckily enough, and went to Walnut Hill School for the Arts, which is outside of Boston, and I taught there for 10 years, teaching ceramics and sculpture and some digital classes. And that was an amazing place to teach, because I had 3-hour studios like a college, so the students would come home, come to me in the afternoon. So I'd spend a great deal of time with these teenagers, and it was amazing. It's just an amazing time, I think, you know, of teens' life or young people's lives when they're going through so much transition. But anyway, I had a very small studio, so I started making tile. That was really the first time I started making kind of more modular tile, and ended up quite a few times going up to Watershed Center for the Ceramic Arts in the summers. And when I was there, I found some brick molds that were from there, it was once a functioning brick factory. So I started pressing and using those molds and assembling those into some pieces. And then from that started making my own molds that really resembled kind of traditional brick molds or traditional hand-pressed architectural terracotta molds. And that just basically evolved through several iterations of different types of systems, working with concave and convex forms, working with freestanding walls, working with pieces that have more of a feel of landscape, like flat on the floor, but all individual and modular systems. I think a lot of my work is sort of system-based, and I think of it, the finished pieces are kind of a result of that system. I'm not intervening directly on the clay so much as creating a system and allowing the clay and the materials to be themselves. And in this particular piece, you'll also see these layers of pattern. I did work and travel around Italy quite a bit. I taught 2 semesters there, and one of the things that really struck me were the floors of the cathedrals, which are basically, they were made during the Renaissance, at the time when perspective was sort of being developed, and they have these patterns which appear three-dimensional, but they're a flat floor, and it's sort of interesting to think about your perception changing and feeling like you're on a flat, solid surface, but then your depth perception kind of changes, and then you almost feel like you're floating on a surface that isn't flat. So I've been sort of just collecting pattern and using that in the pieces. And another thing that kind of interests me in pattern is the use of pattern during different time periods and by different cultures. There's kind of sometimes a kind of universal visual language of pattern. And I also worked a bit in grad school with Andrea Gill, who is also very into pattern and taught the class when she was on sabbatical, her color and surface class. So I think I'll try to throw in some influences. I think all the faculty I have worked with have been kind of influential in different ways. But these dimensional patterns started coming into my work. I was using a lot of found pattern, but then as I became more interested in using digital technology, I've started to generate my own patterns using parametric systems. So I can kind of like write a program, and I can change variables and move the patterns around until I'm happy with them. The piece over here, again, I'm thinking about that idea of projection and recession. A lot of the mold making, just has that basic negative and positive relationship. So I think a lot about just negative and positive and polarities, and kind of thinking about the different depths of that surface, and using glazes. I often use these transparent glazes to show, again, that not only the texture of the surface, but also the glaze is a sort of a chance for me to not have so much control. There's a certain amount of control, but you will notice that I do allow the glazes to drip. So I often will fire them at an angle in the kiln or on edge in the kiln to get that movement in the glaze. They are all patterns are all projected and then traced and hand painted onto the tiles. So will make a very large easel in my studio and project on with a digital projector. These in particular also have started, a lot of the pieces are started using a tesseract as a pattern, which is a sort of a cube within a cube with the corners connected. And the tesseract is often used kind of as an analogy for the fourth dimension. So I kind of think sometimes about sort of like these kind of dimensions beyond, and ways of that we cannot really understand another dimension, but in science they've supposedly the physics people have said that there's maybe up to 12 dimensions. So that's always been of interest to me. I think the scientific aspect of ceramics has always been a real influence. I was real interested in alchemy like earlier in undergrad, and then coming to Alfred, starting off with Val, but then many times Anne would invite me to come up in the summers during summer school to work in the studio. And John was teaching summer school then, and also along with Bill Carty. And I've sat in on many of Bill Carty's classes, and I think one thing about Alfred is that's always stood out to me is just like trying to find new ways of making things and new ways of thinking about thinking about tradition, but how we can take and kind of change and not necessarily contemporize, but just make clay do things that maybe you wouldn't expect that it can do. One of the I remember one piece in grad school that I made. I went to the grinding room and collected all the dust from the dust collector, and I like this, and made a slip out of it. And I like this idea of like making a piece out of just this dust, in the air. So a lot of the work and a lot of my thinking in grad school, I thought a lot about kind of the hierarchies of clay, like porcelain and earthenware, and how those could sort of also, carry meaning and metaphor. And I think all of the decisions I make, like in the work, like hopefully add up to an experience that you're going to have. So like experiencing just some of those basic things like color and repetition of form, the dimensionality as you look at a piece. So if you stare at the pieces long enough, you will start to get this feeling that they're dimensional. And I like that idea that it's like an optical illusion, and optical illusions are thought of as kind of trickery or like not real, but in fact, it's our own body that's sort of responding. So it's equally as real, but there's sort of that tension between it being an object and it being something that's just a perceptual experience. What else? How much time do I have? Let's see. Yeah, we can move on. I think if people have questions, I'll definitely can answer questions.
Oh, sure. What time are we at? Just
It is 10 to 12.
Oh, exactly. He's done exactly. Jason and I have lots of places in our lives where we overlap and know each other in our schooling and in my teaching and Jason's teaching, which I'll try and, well, maybe we should touch on it now since we're
Sure.
talking to you.
Sure.
But yes, I met Jason when he was an undergraduate at the University of Connecticut, where I was an undergraduate. I was an undergraduate there, but then 12 years later, I was teaching there. So they liked me, they hired me back. And Jason was there as a student. And I got to work with him, and there's all kinds of connections between the work he was making and then the work he's continued to make. And we've gotten to take when I came to graduate school here, as was noted, and then almost 12 years later, they hired me back, so I didn't piss anybody off too badly, and so I worked here. So I know. Jason was in grad school when I came, and I worked with him there. And the other Alfred connection I have that I'd like to just mention is that at the University of Connecticut, I studied with Minnie Nagoro, who, a Japanese American who was interned at Heart Mountain Camp during the war. Her family was there, and she came to Alfred after, I guess it was Dan Rhodes or it was Turner, who came to the internment camp and gave pottery lessons. And then after, Minnie came to Alfred. So she was an Alfred graduate from sometime in the 50s, I forget the exact date. But I got to study with her without even knowing it. I was getting a kind of Alfred education and a point of view about glaze and the importance of materials and using them in a particular way. So I've got all of this Alfred experience in me just by happenstance. I didn't really know anything about Minnie and her experience at Alfred because she didn't speak much about it or the camp until I got out of school. And so this is interesting to me. But let's see. I want to talk a bit about, did we miss anything? Should we talk about something else about your work?
No, we can.
But the thing I know about Jason that I always appreciate is that as an undergrad, he was just very meticulous and very well ordered in everything he did. I always used to look at his toolbox and say, I wish I had a toolbox that looked like that. Everything was in order. And my other thing that I've as in retirement, I've attempted to continue my education, and I've come and I've taken a class with Jason. So we've gone full circle where he has been teaching me digital programs and things like that, and I'm always amazed at his skill. And I'm not sure I quite have the bandwidth or the way to get into it. But watching Jason, maybe if I study with him 3 or 4 times further, I'll get better. But I wanted to talk to you about the piece over there. And as Ben mentioned, there's two kinds of work that I've been mostly associated with and spent a lot of time making. It's these pieces over here that are part of a series of work called A Theory of Everything, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek way, because it's not really everything, but it is everything in a certain niche. And then I'm also been making these, you can come and look at this book, pieces with wet clay. This is just to give you a quick, but that's another kind of installation that occupies me. I guess the one thing I want to say is being at Alfred in particular has allowed me to do the kind of work that I do. I'm kind of an opportunist when I make things. And when I was picking out graduate schools, I said, I could probably make anything here. The facility was really amazing. So I chose this over the University of Washington. But as a kind of opportunist maker, I don't come up with ideas internally wholeheartedly and then and say, I'm going to make work that's about this, I'm going to make work that's about this. I come across a warehouse of thousands of pieces of greenware and I go, what could I do with those? That's interesting. So things start as a kind of just fascination with something that I run into. So that's what I mean. I'm kind of an opportunist. I want to say, what would those things do if I do this with them? Or what do those things do if I have not just one, but thousands of them? So I started collecting obsessively these molds. That actually was a grad student here when I was teaching that was also interested. We answered an ad, and we went to Cornell and got a whole basement full of these molds. So that's, you're probably all familiar where these come from, out of the paint your own ceramic hobby industry, which has really been around forever, in different forms. But I wanted to talk about that piece in particular. The piece there, called Requiem in White, was commissioned by the, see, now I'm going to forget unless I get my thing. Whoop, where'd it go? Was commissioned by it's commissioned by the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, Maryland, and the Bard Graduate Center in New York City. And it was they commissioned it for an exhibition called Majolica Mania, which is this 19th century English, brightly colored lead glazed earthenware that they had these fabulous collections of. And they recognized immediately that my work was, the pieces here kind of are echoes of those 19th century pieces, the same. Really, a lot of them are copies of copies of copies. So in that piece, I'm sure you could find something directly related or copied from one of those 19th century pieces. But that's how my work got in the show as a kind of contemporary maker. But I'm going to just walk over there just for a minute. But in this piece, to make it fit that particular show, because I'd been making work with these pieces for a long time. There's pieces that exist that are completely in the round, etc. But this had to fit in a very particular place in this beautiful gallery in Baltimore. And they wanted it to represent or be a memorial of some type for all of the female paintresses of the Majolica work, which is a lead-based color, and many of the laborers in the manufactories died because of lead poisoning, and so they wanted this to function as a kind of memorial. So some of these figures, most of these figures here are molds, found molds, salvage molds. But this figure here and this woman here, both pouring the pictures, and then this young man here over there as a duplicate, and this figure in the center, I built them myself from knowledge of how to rapid prototype. So these are digitally scanned Alfred students in costumes that are modeled after 19th century pottery workers with the mutton sleeves. The costumes came from the costume shop. I took students to, here this one's too, you can see the mutton sleeves, and she's painting this bowl. We dressed them in costumes and went to Ithaca, where there's a body scanner, so it scans the person, and then they appear on the computer screen as a 3D digital model. So from there, I made molds and cast them in clay. So the mold here, and there were directly to make this work function in the context of that show. Where in some other context, it might not, you can allow it to function in some other way. But it was made specifically as a memorial, and in its context, if you saw a picture of it, you'd see how it worked. Because right above the door in the building, it says, "In Memoriam." So anyway, I was very happy to have that opportunity. But I'll just go back here because I wanted to point that out. And I probably pressed on Jason to help me get those printed, so I could use them that way, because I always wanted to try that. But I brought you a little quote here just to talk about those pieces a little bit more. It's from this book on the cultures of collecting. So you've got to see this as a kind of collection. It's been 10 years or more of an obsession with me, really, is going and finding molds that people no longer want and just picking them up, bringing them home. So I have this giant archive. But here's something from Jean Baudrillard about collecting, which I like, that fits this work. It ought to be obvious that the objects that occupy our daily lives are in fact the objects of a passion, that of personal possession, whose quotient of invested affect is in no way inferior to that of any other variety of human passion. Indeed, these everyday passions often outstrip all of the others and sometimes reign supreme in the absence of any rival. What is characteristic of this passion is that it is tempered, diffuse, and regulative. We can only guess at the fundamental role in keeping the lives of the individual subject or of the collectivity on any even footing, and in supporting our very project of survival. Well, this part is more important. In this respect, the objects in our lives, as distinct from the way we make use of them at any given moment, represent something much more, something profoundly related to subjectivity. For while the object is a resistant material body, it is also simultaneously a mental realm over which I hold sway, a thing whose meaning is governed by myself alone. It is all my own, the object of my passion. So in a sense, collecting all of these molds became a kind of obsessive compulsive thing, and because I always wanted to do something with the accumulation rather than any one in particular. So it's the accumulation that would just fascinate me, and I'll talk a little bit about that particular object. So what has to happen? I mean, when you confront that object, when you first entered the room, as Wayne, we put it down there, it has to be spectacular. It has to be attractive. It has to be something that just draws you in. And if it's not, perhaps it's easily dismissed because you think of the lowbrow things that make it up, potentially. Any one of them by themselves is perhaps not particularly impressive or could be easily dismissed, but all of them at once, creates this spectacle that you have to migrate to. And then once you're there, you see that the arrangement is very meticulous. It's put there with immense care. The sheer number of objects, in the arrangement are the thing that arrests you, its scale, its size, its shininess. And the work, it has to be really spectacular that way to work. As an audience, I think that, people are drawn into this simple pleasure of seeking out resonant objects. And you may fall into a kind of reverie over this thing or that thing. People go, oh, there's that piece that my grandmother had. There's that dog that I love. Or, there's this simple pleasure of pointing things out and looking at them. And there's this beautiful glazed surface that, bursting with random colonies of crystalline zinc, kind of evokes a geologic origin. And it's a kind of effective camouflage that makes you search even more when you get to see, go ahead and get up close. So all of the objects in there, they're from the commercial ceramic hobby industry. They're all, they're originally, believe it or not, no matter what it is, it was designed to cater to some broad range of taste or something of a particular time and place. Some of these objects, some of the molds come from the 1940s. So there's a whole range, there's a whole time frame of things in there. And you might be, think of yourself as highbrow, and you might need one of those neoclassical, Greek statuaries, or Blue Boy, which would remind you of the Gainsborough painting. And then there's just these other, lowbrow objects in there, really stupid, I don't know, things or stereotypes that you might find objectionable. But I've tried not to curate what I thought was the best and not, but let those things be what they are, as this kind of slice of a public imagination, at some time. And so they can function in a whole bunch of different ways. And well, this is sort of a Wayne thing that you used to do, this thing where you would, how many ways can we look at a piece of work? Is to from how many different lenses? You do the lens talk. This is something related to that, I think. But as collections, we can look at collections that. Where's that little note? So any kind of collection, you can think of collections as being assertions of power and privilege. Like the porcelain palaces in Germany of the 18th century. It was just a display of great wealth and privilege. That's a way you can read a collection. A collection can be a scholarly pursuit, like a museum collection, where you try to get one of everything that tells the story, of a particular time and place. Collections or accumulation of objects can manifest as a pathology, as like hoarding, where you have an inability to part with the objects, or it even collecting exists in nature, as if bowerbirds, where they collect hundreds of similar colored and shaped objects. They like orange, they like blue, and they collect them all in front of their bower where they can attract a mate. So collecting can happen in all of these different capacities. Over there, I think maybe I'm more like the bowerbird. I'm not sure, but I think again, from what I was saying at the beginning, where I'm kind of an artist of opportunities that sort of show up, and I didn't know that I wanted to make any work that started to reference all these things. But as I make work for a while, then all of these ideas start to accrete to what I'm doing. It starts to stick to the thing, and then the next work you make, you have all that hindsight and knowledge to put into the next piece. So maybe that's all I need to say.
I've always felt that, I've always been a collector and always felt that students should collect and have a collection. I have a collection of eye cups for washing your eyes out.
I saw that.
Yeah. I have a collection of miniature photographs of really grand landscapes.
Oh, you gave me some of your. Jason made a piece as an undergraduate that I really loved. It was this. It was using one of these old glass slides of a landscape, a 19th century slide for like a big projector, And it was in this beautiful box that he covered with mud, and then there was a little cup hanging from it, and it gave you this kind of sense of wandering into this sort of ancient, sort of eroding, because the landscape is almost not there anymore on the glass. It just gave you the sense of entering this space. And was it the one with the cargo net? No, that was
a different one. But actually, that came from that series of work kind of came from one of your assignments, which was we had to make an object-image relationship.
I love that assignment. That's right.
Yeah. And I was wondering, how do you give yourself assignments, or how do you come up with assignments?
Well, I'm in a phase now where I'm trying to come up with assignments because I've made I don't know how many of these pieces, and I'm running out of room for them. They take up a lot of room. I'm going to show one of these. I'm going to show another one in the Fuller Museum in Massachusetts. So we're fairly close if you want to come see it. It's one, instead of white, it's like this luster. And what's amazing about it, everything is lustered. Shushank Shrestha helped me do this, one of our grad students, and also Stephanie, who had a good knowledge of these. But if you can imagine one of these fully in the round and all of this crazy luster color, it's almost impossible to look at, which is really amazing. That's really great. But that's going up. But my assignment now is to not make more of those. And maybe use up the extra things that I have, and then try and make some smaller work that you might actually be familiar with because it's older work. But I'm also someone who saves a lot of things. So I have all these parts that I've saved for years and years. It's embarrassing to say how long they've been sitting around, but I go, I'm going to use this some point. And it's smaller work. It's based on casting some of these objects, but manipulating them singularly. And you've probably seen some because I made some of them in Connecticut. Really.
Oh yeah.
But I'm trying to give new assignments for myself to use up those. One of my assignments is just use up all the parts in your studio. Just use them all up.
Yeah.
And that would be great if I could do that.
We could open it up to questions.
Sure.
Would you like me to moderate and find the people, or?
Whatever. Sure.
Yes.
Okay, so what? Go ahead, John.
Walter,
Mm-hmm.
in the plastic pieces that are behind the plastic curtains, you have moisture.
That work.
That work.
Yes.
And this one here, you have glaze.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the moisture and the glaze?
In some sense.
Are they the same thing?
Well, in a broad sense, they are almost the same thing because one, I can't help when these are raw clay pieces that when you put this plastic curtain down around them, the water content in the clay is drawn up by heat. There's a light in the top, so you're creating condensation constantly, and they're really made to do that. And that's the attractor. That's the thing that seems, no matter whether I talk about it, that seems sort of matter of fact. When you see it, it's sort of enthralling. It's like you're looking into a weathered landscape, and that is the hook. I think the moisture and the glaze too is the hook. Without that glaze, because I've tried to make some that were, say, I don't know, just a pure black or something. It would never quite work because it was too blunt, where this glaze comes out in multiple colors and tones and creates the camouflage of the crystals and things. So I think it's the hook. It's a hook. It's a great hook that gets you into the piece.
How did you develop a conversation with glaze?
How did I develop it?
I remember when you were going up for tenure, it said, well, just glaze it.
I know. Well,
Really wonderful pieces that you just glazed. So how did you develop the conversation with glaze?
Well, I would, John was, when I was in graduate school, John was around and he'd come into my studio in, 12 years before I ever taught here and tell me, Walter, just glaze that. Or he'd tell me something else and he'd tell me something else and I would go, yeah, that doesn't resonate. But then you'd come in and tell me something else and it's like, okay, that resonates. I'm going to take that cue. So I've listened to you at various times because I am somewhat prone to procrastinate, and what happens usually, what works out best is you just do it because you don't know exactly what you're going to get, and sometimes you get something that's much better than you thought you'd get, if you just do it. So that's a kind of dialogue you pushed me along in.
I had a piece of observation about increases, but I think we covered that really beautifully. But my question that arrived earlier in my head was you've both been here at Alfred in different capacities at different times. And what I'm curious about is how you might compare and contrast the present moment, let's say, or the evolution. When you were a grad student, X, we were both grad students, there was something going on. I know the faculty have changed and some of that, but just to give us some insight into, a certain frame of time, a certain point in time, and contrasting where we are in the moment. We have a lot of young artists who are here in this moment, but it is a different place than maybe it was when you were first here, or however you want to take that question and shed some light on it.
Well, some similarities are, I think, the intensity is always there here at Alfred, in the graduate program and in the undergrads. I think it both in undergrads and grads, it's a place where people just are forced together for so many years, working together in the studio. They really develop very deep connections, and also with the faculty themselves. So it's interesting to always come back and see that, but you have a familiarity when you walk into the studio that, oh, that was my studio. I remember all these people, and just for me, kind of thinking about the room here, the artists in the room who are in the exhibition, just how much of kind of an influence I can see in my work, and maybe it wasn't so obvious to me before, but kind of thinking about it a little bit more in the context of the history, I think there is something about Alfred that's unique and kind of, I guess the intensity and the again, just thinking about the scientific side, when I was in graduate school, there was quite a bit of crossover with some of the engineering students and things like that. In people's work, graduate students would, work with sometimes with engineers to figure out certain issues with the clay bodies and things like that. So that sort of speculative nature of ceramics in a way has always been there, I think.
Yeah, I've been here through a lot of different shifts and changes also in faculty, and I'm really pleased I retired and got to see the new group of faculty come in, because I think they're really good, and I'm happy that we're left with this group taking over, and they work. I think they work as they should, somewhat differently than I might have worked. And I see there's there's in a number of the faculty, there's a new kind of conceptualization that is important. Yet I also see them as being, they might elevate that, but I also see that there's still in all of them a connection to material that I think Alfred has always been known for and interested in. I mean, I've taught at the School of the Art Institute for a year in Chicago, and there, what was interesting about that program is there was a lot more art history and things required that were more research based and bookish spaced. And when you came in as a grad student in ceramics, you could freely move to another area and just be there. And it produced a certain kind of work, and there was some great people coming out of there, but it lacked in, everybody was slip casting things. It lacked in a certain range of knowledge and material that, I find really attractive and really provocative in some of the work that's made here at Alfred, that's continually made here at Alfred. And I was thinking about a little conversation that I think Nikki and Paul were having, or just touching on it. They were talking about, concept and material and how it's working, and how Nikki's been brought closer to looking, because he went to Berkeley, and now he's closer to material in a way that he hadn't been before. And I think that she, likes that a lot. And but the way that what it looks like and what it means is I was just reading about that, Dave Hickey taking that question, like what it looks like and what it means. It's an interesting dialogue that I wasn't quite figuring out, but it's always important. What it means and what it looks like and what it means are synonymous, really. You can't separate them out. You have to deal with both those things.
I have a question, but I'll open it up to anybody else. Anybody want to have a go? Yes, please.
Excuse me.
I mean,
for the sake of the camera, I'll just repeat that nice and
Oh, yeah.
loud. The question is to do with the scale of ceramics, and are you intentionally challenging this, or is it, what are you doing with that?
I think I use terracotta red clay because I like the way it looks, but I also like the fact that it's just really common. It's basically like a brick-like material. I think when I was in graduate school, I was coming from working with a lot of mixed media, so you could kind of pick and choose more, almost like objects or materials as words in a poem or a type of language. So I was kind of thinking about clay in that way, where it might, like porcelain will have a certain set of ideas connected to it, and earthenware might, and stoneware might. But I didn't really stick with that. I think it's there, but it's not really a real important part of the work. I think it's enough that people can just look at it and have that they know it's like a brick-like material. But I was always kind of just interested in it, and it's again, because of the more you learn about ceramic history, and the more that you learn about how things are borrowed and how things are copied with another material and adapted, the more sort of like different types of kind of metaphors you can kind of think about. So yeah.
Did you say something about challenging scale? What was the question again?
Oh, like challenging the hierarchy. I don't know if it really exists anymore so much, but
It's
yeah.
piece. The, my piece over there, in some sense, challenges hierarchies. It's kind of working with pieces that are made to be most democratic, accessible to a general non-art public, and then it's doing something, inverting them and turning them on their heads and making you think about all those different relationships. That's what I hope in part that piece does. Yeah, I don't, I'm not worried about any particular hierarchy or whatever, whether I'm always worried about that's too big to sell to anybody.
Well, Walter's like always, he likes to like being his student, likes to unpack things down to every kind of detail. So I think, sort of studying with him kind of taught me to kind of look at work that way in some ways, in a way to interpret and gain meaning from it, looking at the material, like how it's used, what history does that object or material have. Even any object you pick up has probably a history of design and a connection and a type of material it's made out of, how it's made. So it's sort of like you can gain meaning from that, just even if it's not a piece of artwork necessarily.
I was making just quick, I was making a fairly glib comment when I said that, but what I was saying is that I've always made things that were difficult, for a kind of gallery setting. I sort of grew up making work in alternative spaces and warehouses and things, and so that's where my whole kind of aesthetic of working with installation came from. So all of my work is like a performance. You have to go somewhere, and I have to build it, and that's a different kind of work. But I just was making what I thought I needed to make, and it's also the rhythm of being in school allowed me to make that. It was hard to get to a studio every day, but when a big event comes up and I make a big piece, I can go do it. So these works sort of suited the rhythm of being at Alfred, and of course I couldn't have done them anywhere else in the world. I could not have made such a big piece without the facilities here. And John was asking a question there.
I had questions for Walter. Jason, I worked with you in Crescent Foundation. We did a lot of stuff together. And today, I think your speech was so amazing. Just how you kind of like put everything together in a great way. When I went to Kansas City Art Institute, Victor Ferguson said, if they had only taught us this at Alfred, what we're trying to teach now. We don't have a major here, but I think that this show is sort of a transitional thing. And this question goes to you. What can we do at Alfred? How would you put it together in some sort of package? And why would somebody want to come work with you to get all that information? I really think that you know how it moves. I mean, there's like genre, you have Hammond, you have how do you get this stuff here to really kind of move? And it's sort of like the question I asked at the end of the last one. It's like, where you're trying to figure out what the new AI is or whatever it is. How are you going to do that? And it's an unanswered question because you really need to kind of like research it, and then you really need to see how many ideas students have that would be excited to work with you on those ideas. So there's no answer to that. I really
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy where I have kind of evolved to as a teacher and being able to teach the digital technologies and how that can inform people's studio work.
But you're going to come up with something else that you think is really interesting.
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
And you know, you can take a car engine apart and put it back together, can't you?
yep. I used to have a yeah.
What's the
That's
difference between this, taking a car engine apart and putting it back together into a new language? And
yeah.
I don't know a better mechanic than you. And so, good luck.
Thank you, John.
Andy?
Ben has a question.
Well, I have one of these, how somebody kind of, and it turns into, it's more like a comment, and it just ends up taking a long time rather than an actual question. And I don't know if anyone really wants to bear with me, but why not? Because I am really, really interested in both of these pieces. One of the things that's compelling to me about both of them is that they're both based on accumulation, as you were calling collection. Tiles are they're accumulations of tiles. And so for me, the function of art, in a sense, is to resist the instrumentalizing effect of reason by insisting on the validity of the sensual particular. So like this is its own thing. It's very difficult to put this under a concept that names it because it's this thing. It's its own thing. We can call it art, which is a very unhelpful concept. And that's the best we can do. It insists on its own individual specificity. And that's the resistance that art offers us in this rather bleak world. But with the aesthetics of accumulation, of quantity, that particularity gets effaced, right? You were talking about how each of these specific little pieces accumulates until the individual pieces are lost. And in tile work, that's true. But so my question for Jason, because I think that some of your work more lately since this has moved into almost more even more painterly pieces in which the tile is an individual piece, in which the accumulation isn't quite. And so that's a kind of a question for you. And for Walter, even though I think I kind of already know the answer, I guess I'm just interested in how that politics of accumulation, of the liquidity of the individual, how important that is in this work that you're doing. So maybe go Jason first.
Yeah, I think my more recent work, some of the pieces I've been doing are more using the scale of objects on the surface to suggest depth in a different way. Just in they're maybe more pictorial in that way. They're not so much like just a single surface. And then I think just my other work that I'm working on now are much. They're still modular, but they're maybe more contained objects. They're slip cast, and I'm using more basically a pentagon polyhedron with a sphere inside, and then I can cut that into individual tiles. So they end up being almost like a reflector dish kind of thing. So yeah, I'm on to something else probably. Just like Walter was saying, yeah, you make a lot of things for a while, and then you're like, I have plenty, and yeah.
Well, I've always thought about it. Wonder if I could just make a singular thing. I always find myself restless and somewhat dissatisfied that thing tells all the story I want it to tell. That there's something about my just way of making decisions that keeps me moving, and I make lots of parts of things and try to assemble them to find the thing that I think is lively and interesting to me. But though the one thing that the piece over there is it's kind of like, because there's so many parts, it's kind of like a cosmology of things, in the world, and to see it that way is different than any of the one of them would be. As much as I might like one of them, or I have certain favorites, and then certain things I've always thought were, god awful things, but all of them are designed at some point by someone for something, and I just like to understand that kind of world, or that kind of large cosmos of invention, is what I see in them, even though they might be dismissible in some point or another.
It just puts them all onto the same plane. I mean, you've got Jesus Christ, you've
Yeah.
got St. Thomas Aquinas, you've got like pretty overtly racist figures.
Which one? Because they are, that's part of what those things are.
And Donald Duck and
Yeah,
all these sorts of things, as though they're all equivalent, as though there's just this big radical. All of these things, they're now just stuff for your shelf, right? So there's this kind of liquidation of meaning by the consumerist kind of impulse. So I don't know. It's just a question of like, are you really? Is this like? And I read this as a very sort of capitalist kind of critique.
Oh yeah, sure.
So how heavy is that?
Well, that comes out in a lot of different ways. I understand that there are pieces in there that are offensive to certain bodies of people, and I'm just bringing them out and allowing that to happen in a way, because they've been part of probably an all-white hobby, that came about at some point, or all the pieces used to only cater to a certain group, and then you see the industry trying to cater to different groups, and it doesn't work very well. But I didn't invent those things. They're just there, and my choice was, I go to a place and I say, I want all of these things, and so it's like putting them out uncurated, and say, this is what they do. This is how they work. Yes, that's part of how they worked in the cosmos. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wayne's gonna go again.
I just want to quickly follow up on that, because you're talking a very general term. And so it begs the question, what's ceramics got to do with it? In other words, it is ceramic, not wood. It's not a film, not a projection. But ceramics has a particular history, a particular, frame of mind. It is ceramic. And we haven't heard you talk about that fact, and how that is partly, in essence, the conceptual premise.
Well, there are a number of ways I go into it. In part, we're asking what, are we asking kind of why ceramics? Is that sort of the question? What's ceramics got to do? I think I'm in it like a fan. I just like what it does, and if I were to paint it, this is how it looks and how it's made. It influences what it means. And so when it's ceramic, it has this whole vast history behind it that I like to touch stones with. I was at the Louvre, I don't know, a while ago. Yeah, I stole the jewelry. Yeah, I have the jewelry at home. But this was years ago. But I was enamored with when you were in. I guess it was one of the wings with these Greek figurines, and it was demonstrating how they're all made in molds, and how they're all repeatable because they're actors in the plays. So they're the celebrities of the time that are manufactured and sold to the masses. So I was just kind of surprised I hadn't seen them until I went there. So what does that have to do with it? I've bought into a history that I like working with, I bought into a history that continually interests me. I am unreasonably attracted and enamored with what glazes do and their connection to geology and earth in a way that paint isn't. As much as somebody says, well, I can paint it red and it'll look just the same. I said, no, it won't. I can tell. I'm just enamored with those qualities. And I guess I'm not, I don't know. That's that's my answer, because frequently people, well, why ceramics? I don't say, well, why not? Why can't I make ceramics say this? Why can't I make it say this? But
That paints the work in any. This would be true of any material. So
sure, yeah, it's true.
and the best way to dice it up probably is to ask what it would be like in another material.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
But also, I think you gave an answer that's related to hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
and your choice of the voice of the material,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which relates to your artistic, intuition,
Mm-hmm.
your sense of self as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe with that. Oh, do you want to respond?
Oh, no, I would just say, I make a lot of things out of other kinds of things too. So it's but in this case, I'm in deep.
Well, it's part of the tradition.
Yeah.
Here,
So
isn't it?
yeah.
There are molds that were part of a commercial. So ceramics has its art tradition, has its design
Yeah.
tradition, has its art,
Yeah.
and it also has this kind of weird craft tradition in which it was mass produced.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, we can clap it. Let's clap everybody out of here. Thank you, everybody.